So welcome back to Let's Get Moving podcast, people. I'm your host, Ivan Markovic, and today we are diving deep into the psychology of peak performance. We are also going to move beyond that, not just physical training. We want to explore the essential role of the mind in achieving true excellence here. We have an exceptional guest today joining us. It's Nevern Subramani. Nevern is a speaker, a writer, a health and mental performance coach. He is also a licensed psychologist and a high performance coach, originally coming from South Africa. His resume is generally very staggering to me, and he doesn't just work with athletes, he works with all elite individuals. The individuals who defines the limits of human capability nowadays, I believe. That's why I think he's the right person to do this conversation with. Nevern is also an expertise who spans with really unique range of disciplines throughout many different sport disciplines and even beyond that. I think that his mission is to unlock both sustained high performance and deep well-being. So today we are going to uncover that specific mental demands of this competitive world that we are living in, the tools that he uses to help his clients navigate extreme pressure, perfectionism, and even burnout that we can see more often, and how we can apply these elite mental strategies to our own daily routines. So, Nevern, thank you so much for joining us today, my friend.
Thanks, Ivan. Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
Good to
Nevern,
be here.
welcome. Could you just start by sharing a little bit about your journey here? So, what led you from your African roots to becoming a very premier and high elite coach, also a psychologist, and what specifically drew you to work with the mental side of this incredibly demand occupation?
Yeah, thanks for the question. So when I was very young, I was very interested in high performance from a very, very young age
Yeah,
because I think my mom had set me up with the value of learning and
yeah,
education. So she used to teach me these mathematical sums and formulas on a chalkboard before I went to school and teach me different words and got me interested in sports and different activities. So from a young age, I was very interested in high performance and throughout my school career, I became very competitive. I valued being competent at things. And so in my early years, I was
yeah.
oftentimes first in the grade in terms of academics. And I ran through, I was captain of the chess team.
Well,
I had done swimming and cricket and football. And so I was very interested in how can I be competent? How can I master a new task? How can I become an expert at something academically, sports wise, in terms of culture and arts? I eventually learned 7 instruments and created a
oh.
little one-man band. And so I've been fascinated with what the human mind is capable of and how we can achieve high levels with that. And that continued into my studies. I got into psychology because I wanted to help people. And so I studied psychology. I got into a very competitive master's program. And I kept moving through different fields within psychology. So, where my journey sort of started was very explorative. I worked at a psychiatric facility with people who were actively suicidal or
Wow.
depressed or psychotic. And then I moved to a child and family unit with children who were incredibly dysregulated. I then worked at a neuropsychological facility for people who had brain injuries and things like that, oftentimes from sports. I eventually moved to a forensic facility where I worked with criminals because I wanted a challenge. I had always pushed myself to try to solve the hardest problems and to learn how to be competent in the most difficult spaces. But that's when I ran into a bit of trouble that set me on this career path because while I was at that forensic facility, I started to have a very difficult time because suddenly I was dealing with a population who didn't want to be there. They were essentially in prison cells. These were people who had committed some severe crime. So it was murder, or sometimes it was malicious damage to property, or many, many severe crimes. And these people oftentimes didn't want to be there. And it frustrated me because I'm used to being competent. I'm used to performing at a high level, and suddenly I couldn't do that with this population. And it really frustrated me. I had lots of internal struggles. Eventually, it led me to relying on alcohol after work and feeling burnt out and tired. Eventually, I from all the stress, I had a panic attack. And I remember I was lying in my bed. I had this panic attack. I felt I was going to die. A horrible, horrible experience. It's almost like I felt the presence of death. I even had some suicidal ideation in that moment, and I thought, you know what, I'm pushing myself too hard. Like something's got to stop here, because
Mhm.
at the moment at that time, it was not just the forensic facility that I'd been working at. I was also enrolled in my PhD. I was on the board of directors for two nonprofit organizations. I was doing extra training in psychology. So my plate was extremely full. I had become obsessed with performance. And so after that moment, I had booked a session with my psychotherapist, and we got very, very deep in that session. And eventually I realized that when I was that kid, all the way back when, trying to be competent and trying to perform at a high level, what I was actually trying to do was feel worthy, was
Yeah.
to feel good enough, was to feel like I mattered and like I was valuable. And that session was very, very deep for me because it made me realize just how much of my performance and my desire to perform at a high level was based on a very fragile psychology. And from there, I decided, you know what, something has to change. I
Yeah.
can't keep living in this way with this black and white mentality about being good enough or not being good enough. And so I began to try to find a happier path to high performance because I still cared about high performance. I still cared about doing cool things in the world and contributing in some meaningful way and just doing interesting things with my life. But I needed a different path to get there. And so I started to wonder, is there a path where things feel a bit lighter, where it feels more playful and less tense, where it feels more purposeful and meaningful rather than anxious, and where it feels more energizing than exhausting?
Yeah.
And so that's when I started to map out this path to using my psychological expertise on myself. I started to chart out a path where I can perform at a high level, but I'm being fueled by well-being. I'm being fueled by a sense of wellness, and that overflows into how I'm performing and how I do the work that I do. And since then, my life had changed. I stopped procrastinating. I stopped feeling so tense. My dependence on substances had declined. And I just felt overall a lot better. And ironically, still did lots of cool things with my time, still achieved things. I didn't struggle, but now it was from a different space. From the inside out, that had changed. And that's eventually what got me into the career of working with high performers like athletes and entrepreneurs and artists, people who need to perform at a very high level, because I started to use this framework that I developed with myself, with other people, and went through the scientific literature on what exactly leads to high performance without sacrificing your well-being, without burning you out, without stressing you out. And it was a pleasant surprise that there are many ways to do that. There are many paths towards success and high performance that don't have to necessarily lead to you sacrificing your mental health and your well-being. In other words, your happiness can be the foundation for your success, and that's
Exactly. Yeah.
that framework to working with athletes. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that area that you have to go through, practically unravel all of the areas that you have to also discover maybe from the another side. But maybe beyond the practical point of view. When we hear the word coach, we usually think of a technical skill person and physical conditioning maybe. But how do you define mental performance coaching in a context of an elite athlete or just being professional? So what is your primary goal when you start working with a new client here?
So there's this legendary sports psychologist. His name is Bill Bessick,
Okay.
and he's worked with very famous people like David Beckham and Manchester United players, and he's worked with famous basketball players. But what he does, and I learned this from him, is when he works with an athlete and he needs to help them understand what mental coaching is or mental high performance is, he asks the athlete, what does high performance mean within your context?
Yeah.
So he'll ask him, what does it mean? Give me some words. And he gives them a piece of paper and he has them write down these words. And then after they've written down a bunch of words on this paper and brain dumped whatever comes to mind, he'll take the piece of paper and he'll start circling some of these words. And then he'll say, what do all of these words that I've circled have in common? And then they'll think for a bit, and eventually, if they don't get it, he'll say, they're all mental. And usually the amount of words circled are half or more off the page.
Yeah.
And that's, I find that to be such a beautiful way of showing just how much high performance is directly dependent on mental, psychological, and emotional well-being. And so that's something I do with people that I'm seeing. I get an understanding of what high performance means to them, and then I ask them for the words. And then once they put it down from their perspective, because they're the expert within their domain, but once they tell me what high performance is, I help tease out those psychological, mental, emotional elements. And then we start to think about how can I, using my clinical psychology expertise and my high performance coaching expertise, how can I help you get rid of some of those barriers?
Awesome. So it sounds like practically a mind-body connection here, just to be the one. But you're a psychologist and mental performance coach as well. How integrated are these two roles? Do you find that a client's mental block or blockages often originates in their physical health, or maybe some other problem may be like a primary here?
So it's a good question. And I think about things a bit differently than most people, because I think most people, when they think about what is the root of the cause, is it the body or the mind? I think oftentimes they're trying to get to what they call the deeper issue.
Yeah.
They think about there being a surface issue and what's the deeper issue. That's their model.
Yeah.
I think about it a bit more systemically. And what I mean by that is I think of the mind and body as systems that are interacting with each other rather than it being a medical model of where there's an underlying disease and then that causes the surface symptoms.
Yeah.
So just to clarify that for the audience, a lot of psychologists still use the medical model to understand what's going wrong with people. So they think of depression, for example, as an underlying disease, and then it leads to symptoms like difficulties with sleep, difficulties with appetite,
Yeah.
suicidal ideation, hopelessness. I don't think about those as symptoms. I think about those as parts of a system where, let's say you're struggling to sleep. Your mood will probably feel a bit lower.
Yeah.
When your mood is lower, you might comfort eat. When you comfort eat, it might affect your self-esteem. When your self-esteem is low, you might feel anxious. When you're anxious, you might struggle to fall asleep. So you see, in that way, all the different parts of the system are holding the system in place. That's what causes the stuckness.
Yeah.
I don't think about it as there being an underlying disease. So when you ask me, is it the mind or is it the body? I think about there being many parts of the mind and many parts of the body, and they can create vicious cycles between themselves that keeps the person stuck. And where we intervene will depend on your expertise. If I'm a psychologist, I'll intervene at the mental level.
Yeah.
If you're a coach or someone like you that can help from the physical side, then that would probably be more helpful to disrupt the system.
I see. Well, we are living now in a world of perfectionism, and when the people are practically searching for that self-worth. And in a sports like maybe football, rugby, or any other, it can be very subjective. But how do you coach some athletes, especially maybe young people, to manage this intense pressure for being a perfect, or just separate their performance from critique, and also when they want to divide critique from their personal self-worth that they are facing on a daily level?
Yeah, it's a great question because
Thank you.
those two are oftentimes tied up. So I think it's great that you put this question in here, because oftentimes our performance and our self-worth are heavily tied together. Like I told you at the beginning of the podcast with my own experience.
Yeah.
That was definitely the case for me. And I've seen that a lot in my therapy practice and in my high performance coaching practice. So I think one of the keys to making sure that these two don't get tied in with each other is to make sure that the underlying motive is not self-worth related or is not ego related. And what I mean by that is your underlying motivation for the reason you're doing the work you do, for the reason that you're an athlete, for the reason that you're performing at a high level, it shouldn't be to boost your ego.
Yeah.
As soon as that is the underlying reason or the underlying motivation, then those two will be tied together because your performance is a means to an end
Yeah.
rather than performance being the end in and of itself. Rather than your performance being the thing that you enjoy, suddenly it feels very scary to not perform well or to not be perfect because your ego is dependent on it. Your performance is now feeding your ego. And so, what I often try to do with clients in my therapy practice is to try to separate out the motivation of performing well because they enjoy what they do versus the motivation to perform well so that they feel better about who they are. And that's a difficult thing to do. Self-worth and self-esteem and identity, these are deep, deep processes, and they can oftentimes take a lot of time to change. And you oftentimes need a lot of new experiences, and you need to immerse yourself in a new way of thinking to be able to start to do your work or achieve at a high level for the joy of it, for purpose, for passion, for playfulness, rather than because you don't feel good enough at core. And so how I help people separate themselves from those two things is first realizing what the underlying motivation is, and then we try to build out alternative motivations and have the engine running from those cleaner fuel sources.
Yeah, that's good. I love the analogy that you use that practically all of the athletes should leave their ego outside the locker room. And but we are living also in a society, and I have to mention this, that fear of failure. And in a high risk sports, one mistake can instantly be visible. But can you walk us through maybe a common scenario where an athlete is maybe crippled by the fear of falling or just failing? In general, and what immediate mental maybe reframing techniques are you using to helping them to step out of the that zone as soon as possible, maybe into the confident zone? How should I say?
Right. Okay, so if someone's getting caught up in some fear or some anxiety, the first thing I like to make them realize is that fear or anxiety is oftentimes future based.
Yeah.
It's based in something that is going to happen, meaning it's not happening right now. Right now, in this moment, it's not happening. And that awareness is very helpful because once you have that awareness that the fear of failure is an imagination of
Yeah.
what's to come, then you can deal with it as an imagination, not as a reality, but just as an image that's floating in your mind.
Yeah.
And so what oftentimes helps with fear of failing or fear of falling, especially in those performance moments where you need to perform, is to get very present. If the fear and anxiety live in the future, then getting present automatically means the fear and anxiety can't touch you
Yeah.
within that space. And this is why things like mindfulness, things like breathing techniques, grounding techniques, that's anything that can get you out of your mind and into your life, into the present moment, will be very helpful. So if we take one of those as an example, since you asked for something practical,
Yeah.
if we use a grounding technique like the 5-4-3-2-1. So how you use this technique is you use your five senses as the doorway into the present moment.
I see.
And you start with 5. So what I'll say to someone is just quickly notice 5 things that you can see. So right now, Ivan, you can do that as well.
Okay.
Just notice 5 in your space, right? And just notice how quickly you can do that.
Okay.
Quick, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then what you can do is 4 things you can hear.
4 things that I can hear.
And
Okay.
yes, and you can also make the sounds,
I see. Okay.
right?
So for myself.
Got it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
3 things, then it's 3 things you can touch.
3 things that I can touch.
So
Okay. Yeah.
yeah, you literally, I'm touching my laptop,
Yes.
my desk,
Myself,
this
the
mug,
desk, also having the cup here. Okay.
right? Good, good. Okay, then 2 things you can smell. So you can, if you
Okay.
notice any scent in the room, you can even notice what your shirt or
Yes.
cologne smells like,
Yeah. My perfume. Yeah.
right? Yeah, and then one thing that you taste. So the taste in your mouth, even if it's you don't have a specific taste, just that general feeling
Yeah.
in your mouth.
Okay.
If you cycle through these 5 things, and it's pretty quick, right, Ivan?
Yeah.
So if you cycle through these 5 things very quickly, 5 things you can see, 4 you can hear, touch 3 things, smell 2, taste 1, you'll automatically feel more grounded because suddenly you've been pulled into the present. You've forced your mind into all 5 of the senses,
I
which
see.
grounds you in the present moment, and it makes any anxiety and fear that feeds off future-based thinking, it shrinks it.
Yeah. I think that practically helps you to gain over the control. Like you said, to control the narrative, to be and live in the present. I love it. But you also work across very different areas here. What is the biggest maybe psychological differences in the pressure each type of the maybe athlete or a high level person faces, and how does your approach maybe changes between them when you have to work with them?
Right,
Maybe just tell
right.
a couple of
It's
examples here even more to
okay,
go a little bit
perfect.
to
So
go a little bit further. Yeah.
perfect, will do.
Hmm.
So if we get very practical with the examples, I think about the examples as being in 2 major categories. One major category of pressure is a bunch of small pressures that build up into a big pressure. Some professions, some sports are like that,
Yeah.
where it's what we call the cumulative load or the allostatic load that builds up over time. And there's a physical analogy here as well, where your body can only take so much physical strain over time. But there are other professions where there's a huge demand in the moment. So it's a huge amount of intense pressure, and the person needs to deal with that huge pressure in the moment. So if we think about each of these categories, a lot of tiny amounts of pressure over time would be someone more in the entrepreneurial space, for example. If we even go outside of sport,
Hmm.
someone who's an entrepreneur will constantly have this lingering tension of I need to make money. Where am I going to get funding from? Is this business going to take off?
Yeah.
And all those, it's like a death by 1,000 paper cuts. All these little paper cuts are happening to them that can eventually take them out. If we're dealing with that kind of pressure, we need to think differently because with that kind of pressure, we need to think about how to eliminate many of the sources of pressure, how to change your thinking so that it doesn't add to the pressure, how to create a routine and a lifestyle where you feel more positive emotions so that it can counterbalance a lot of those negative emotions. Whereas if we're dealing with the intense pressure that you have to deal with in the moment, and here I'm thinking about uh, athletes who perform at a high level, and now it's tournament day or it's the final of whatever competition that you're competing in.
Yeah.
In that moment, especially if you're in a huge stadium and there are all these people watching you and it's being televised and your coach is depending on you and it's been such a long journey to get to this point and now it is time to perform. Now you have to put on you have to put your best foot forward. In that moment, the way in which we deal with that pressure would be very different because that pressure you need some way to be able to regulate your anxiety and your stress in that moment, because in that moment you will be feeling it. You
Yeah.
will be feeling an intense amount of stress, anxiety, or pressure. Even if you've done all your training, even if you've practiced, you're going to feel those butterflies. You're going to feel some tension in your body, and you need to be able to override that feeling in that moment so that you can enter a bit more of a focused flow state and get in the zone. So there, with that, we could use something like the grounding technique, but we can also think about something that's even more immediately impactful, like breathing. One of the quickest ways to get out of a fight or flight response, if that's how you're feeling on performance day, is the physiological sigh, which is 2 deep breaths. It's in, and then another one, and then a big sigh.
Yeah.
Right. So you can do it again with me, Ivan.
Yeah.
Big breath in, another one, and then
Yeah.
big sigh. Right. How do you feel just doing that twice? How do you
Well,
feel right now?
I felt a relief, and we also teach that kind of technique is actually scientifically proven. I love that you mention it, because when you take 2 deep breaths, but with throughout the nose, is actually much more pulmonary breathing technique. So much more oxygen will actually gonna reach your lungs. So before you actually exhale in between, you inhale one more time and then exhale. So I also teach my athletes, for example, if they have continuously high pulse after a very high interval training session, I like to give them this kind of breathing technique just to bring them down as quick as possible. So I love that you use that as well. So actually, just gonna confirm what I taught them so years back. And I love that, because you mentioned a very key point here: the scarcity. The scarcity, I think, can be our biggest opponent, but also many people are facing the identity crisis. And many athletes out there, they tie their entire identity to the sport. And maybe what advice do you give such clients who are facing maybe injury, retirement, or a temporary setback, or maybe even need to navigate themselves from that emotional transition away from, being just a high performant person? I mean,
Right.
how
So,
do you help them to escape that, that dogma?
right.
Yeah,
So change is hard. Just for any human being,
yeah,
change is inherently hard. When you look at the research on some of the most stressful things for human beings, if you quantify it and you rank it in a list, number one would be a death.
yeah,
Second would be divorce. So these are life events, right?
yeah,
So the
yeah,
death of a loved one, going through a divorce or separation or breakup, that's number two.
yeah,
Third is a move or a change in your life. So if you physically move to a new location, or there's some change in your career or anything like that, it's actually number three on the list, just behind death and divorce.
oh,
That is how stressful changes and transitions in our lives can be. So that's I just want to empathize with anyone who's struggling with that, just to say, if you feel if it's feeling difficult to navigate an injury or retirement or any sort of change or transition,
yeah,
the first thing you need to know is it's normal. You're not broken for feeling that way. That is just the nature of being human. But what we do from there, after empathizing, how we help the person to adapt to that change, is to say, what does it mean that things have changed for you? What does it mean that you've been injured? What does it mean that you've retired? Because oftentimes, the mental distress doesn't come from the actual event, it comes from the meaning that we attach to the event. So, someone who gets injured, for example, I'll ask them in a session, in a coaching session with them, okay, you're injured. What does that mean to you? And they'll say something like, it means I'm going to never fulfill my goals or my dreams. And then we'll go deeper. I'll ask them, and what does that mean? That you're never going to fulfill your goals or your dreams? They'll say, well, then it means I'm not valuable. Then I'll ask, okay, what does that mean if you're not valuable? They'll say something like, okay, if I'm not valuable, it means no one's going to love me, or something like that, along those lines. Suddenly we're getting to the deeper meaning that this injury is wrapped up in.
Yeah.
And that deeper meaning accounts for a lot of the stress that people feel. Because an injury can be navigated. An injury, some professional athletes have had injuries, they've come back from it, or they've transitioned their role in the sport, or they've tried a new sport, or they've tried a new career,
Yes.
or they've given up that entirely and they've done something else with their lives. But it can be navigated, and you can have a happy, fulfilling life where you still do things that you love and enjoy and that you excel at. But if you have these heavier meanings attached to it, like it means I'm not good enough, it means no one's going to love me, it means I've made my father not proud of me, then you're adding layers of stress with each additional meaning. And so that's what I do in sessions, is I explore not just what happened to you and how you can adapt to it, but what are the deeper meanings here that are actually accounting for a lot of the emotions that you're feeling.
Okay, so basically, as I understand it, so you need to control the narrative and to master how you're self-talking, because the thoughts are crucial here. So I love it. And I also believe that we need all to master that visualization. And visualization is a very powerful tool. Can you maybe explain how elite level sport or athletes should be practicing visualization? So is it just seeing success as the end goal, or is it more in details? So can you maybe just share a visualization technique that is maybe practically effective for our audience here?
So I love that you asked this question, because it isn't just visualizing success.
Mm-hmm.
That's actually a common misconception
Okay.
that people have. When they do visualization techniques, they think it's about imagining that successful moment, the moment you get the gold medal, the moment people are applauding, or the moment that you make the kick or the hit or the shot as successfully and it goes in the net. Good visualization includes two components. So it does include that, because that part can activate you emotionally and viscerally in the body if you do it correctly. Because our imaginative capacity, our ability to imagine things and to visualize them, is actually connected to our emotional system more than words. So even in therapy, if I want to emotionally activate someone, rather than asking them to speak about something, I'll ask them to visualize something or imagine it, because that's a more direct route to emotional activation.
I see.
So that's the first thing.
Yeah.
Right. It's emotional activation. You need that emotional and motivational activation through the visualization. It also helps you focus. So that's very good. But the second component you need to, and this is backed up by a lot of interesting research in the field. I can't remember the researcher's name, but I'll get back to you on that.
Okay.
But there's very interesting research that shows that visualization in high performance situations needs to not just be about the success, but also about potential obstacles, challenges, potential failures on the path to success. So you're going to visualize both of them. You're going to visualize the success, and then you're going to visualize yourself moving toward that success while navigating specific obstacles that you visualize. So let's say you're an athlete, let's say you're a football player, and you visualize scoring a goal because you're the striker in the team. You need to also visualize yourself missing some shots, and then how you're going to handle that as that happens. That way, you're not just setting yourself up an expectation to succeed, but you're also building confidence within yourself that even when these obstacles, challenges, and difficulties arise, I am going to navigate it. I will navigate it. And I've already mentally prepared myself to do so. And because I've mentally prepared myself and emotionally prepared myself for those challenges, obstacles, and difficulties, they're not going to emotionally affect me in the moment when I miss my first shot, when I miss my second shot. I'm not going to stop taking a shot at goal because I've already mentally absorbed that challenge. And so there's a beautiful quote that I oftentimes hear that applies here that says, the bird doesn't sit on the branch because it has confidence in the branch. The bird sits on the branch because it has confidence in its wings.
Yeah.
Right.
I love it. Yeah.
And that's a Yeah, beautiful quote, right? So that I think that's very
Definitely.
applicable here, and that's how you get trust in your wings.
Yes, and I really love to use this analogy for you. I'm just gonna practically um, uh, compare it with the analogy of a tennis player. I just recently caught up with Novak Djokovic's interview with a journalist that he asked him, how can you, achieve that success? How can you be, so successful? And he just said that he's not staying in that state, for example, when he missed a point for too long. He just accepted it, and the next point is a new opportunity. So I think all of the exceptional ones are just able maybe to navigate themselves to exit that state, quicker than maybe some other people. I mean, many other people who are just average, I think they're dwelling a little bit longer in that state of, maybe just misleading, misguiding, or just having um, not that successful end. But we also mentioned at the
Yeah.
beginning of our conversation about the burnout. And battling burnout can be also very serious. And giving to all of the athletes nowadays, they really have tight competition schedules. We are talking about top tier athletes here. And burnout can be a very significant and major risk. So what are the maybe earliest warning signs of mental and emotional fatigue that you teach your clients to recognize? And what is the first step towards that recovery? I mean, can you elaborate here a little bit?
Mm, absolutely. So I lean on the work of the world's leading expert on burnout, who is Professor Christina Maslach.
Okay.
She's done amazing work in the field of burnout. And what I realized when working through her textbook is that burnout is not just about the workload. And a lot of people think that. They think it's about just the amount of training that you're doing, or the amount of projects that you're doing, or the amount of hours that you're staying up late, or the amount of tasks on your plate. It turns out that most of burnout is not accounted for by huge workloads. Because, Ivan, do you know anyone who does an insane amount of work and they never seem to burn out? Do you know anyone like that?
Yes, I know actually. So it's the CEO of the company that I'm working with. He's really practically able to uh, wake himself up like at 3 a.m. and work like the whole day until 9 a.m. So he's like a working machine. So I really,
Right.
you-
Right. Okay.
I
So
start also
yeah,
to
yeah.
question myself about it. Is it like, am I doing enough? And then see some other like a high level performance. So maybe that's why he's at the position where he is. Or he also have like a lot of responsibility towards the others, and just making the company working so very well. So I can really relate on that.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay. So great example.
yeah,
And I'm sure a lot of the listeners can also identify someone in their life or someone they know about who works incredible hours, but they never seem to burn out.
yeah,
They just keep going.
yeah,
And in fact, you can add more to their plate and they're able to take it on. And I'm sure the listeners and you, Ivan, probably know other people who don't have that much on their plate,
yeah,
who are not that busy, and they seem to burn out. They seem to be drained and exhausted and hopeless and depressed and anxious and addicted.
yeah, for sure.
Have you ever seen that happen?
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I mean, constantly.
Right.
Also, I'm just maybe myself. I'm just also a good example. I was very impatient, maybe like in the mid 20s, and I really have to learn, like, just to accept a little bit more and more each time, just in order to develop myself. Because I also noticed along the way
Mm.
the limits of my knowledge and my potential. So I wanted, of course, to exceed it, and in order to do that, I also have to expand it. So my timetable and my schedule also drastically, as soon as I accepted it, drastically change it as well.
Aha. Okay. Great.
Hmm.
Great. So great example. In my
Yeah.
own life as well, I've had periods where I felt more tired and exhausted when I wasn't engaged
Hmm.
with a lot of meaningful work
That's
and
it.
and training and busyness. So what the point here is that this is all evidence that burnout is not just caused by workload or the amount that you're working. It's about a lack of alignment in
Sure.
what you're doing.
Yeah.
So if you are disconnected from the purpose of what you're doing, if it's not fueled by positive emotion, if you feel you're not getting rewards for the effort that you're putting in,
Yeah,
there's no
definitely.
alignment between effort and reward.
Yeah.
These are all things that lead to burnout. And the three signs that I tell people to look out for, and these are the three core features of burnout according to the research, is number one, inefficacy. So if you start losing belief in your ability to do something, and if you start feeling inefficacious, which means you start feeling not good enough, not competent, or you start making little mistakes that you didn't make before, that's one sign of burnout. The second sign is exhaustion. And exhaustion is different from tiredness. Tiredness is fine. If you've had a hectic training day or a
Yeah.
hectic training week, you need to rest and recover. That's part of being human, is performing and then recovering, performing, recovering. But if you feel exhausted, no amount of sleep, rest, relaxation gets you feeling okay again. That is a sign of exhaustion. When you rest, but you don't feel the recovery. So that's a sign to look out for. And then the third one, which is less known, is called cynicism. If you start becoming cynical, it's actually a sign of burnout.
All right.
And being cynical is when you start having thoughts like, what's the point of doing this? This is meaningless. What's the point of anything? Oh, this field is unfair. I'll never be good here. When you start feeling cynical about what you're doing, that can be a sign of burnout.
Okay, that's one that one I didn't know. So
Yeah.
it's very unraveling. But I also know what it helps me throughout that way is also throughout my football career as well, that power of ritual that I have to build each day. And I also know nowadays, of course, that many athletes have pre-competition or just a pre-game ritual that they are executing. And maybe from a coaching perspective, as you are. So what makes maybe, in your opinion, that effective pre-performance ritual that maybe they can develop? And how does it help maybe anchoring the mind and the body to prevent, overthinking the situation?
Right. So whatever your ritual is, and I think ritual can be very helpful to get
Yeah,
you in the right frame of mind and
yeah,
give you a sense of control
yeah.
and agency. But if you have a ritual, you need to make sure it's a ritual that you can do at any time.
Hmm.
So there's a story of this athlete that I was seeing, a tennis player,
Yeah.
and they had this ritual with a specific towel that they would use, a face towel that they used to wipe their sweat. And it so happened that on a day when they were playing in a tournament, they forgot that towel
Oh,
and they couldn't do the ritual without that towel. And they had a horrible performance because of that. So if you have a ritual that has the power to help you perform well, that ritual or the lack of that ritual could also help you perform poorly. So you need to be very careful to make sure that your ritual is something that you can do at any moment, or else it's dangerous. But I think the second thing, in terms of the second part of your question,
yeah.
which is how does it help or why does it help, is I think it has a lot to do with having a sense of control. In other words, having an internal locus of control, meaning that you feel that you can influence outcomes. And it's an interesting feature of human psychology that when we are able to do a specific thing in a specific sequence and get a specific result, it makes us feel like we're going to be able to keep doing that in the future. And so what I've seen with a lot of high performers and people who use rituals is they feel that sense of, I can control what's going to happen. I can control the outcome to some degree. I can determine the success that I'm going to have. And that's very important to perform at a high level. You have to feel that you can influence the outcome. If you don't feel that way, if you don't feel like you're in control of what's going to happen, then a lot of people can lose motivation in that moment, because what's the point if if you know that you're going to try something, but you're not going to be able to create an impact or an effect. I think that's a big part of why rituals are so important.
Okay, so basically what you're saying here that all of those performers are actually able to regulate their emotions under stress much more better, right? But when their emotions can be also running high sometimes, and be in that anger in a football match or in a rugby game just can be even a panic attack before maybe some kind of lift in a waiting room, for example. But what is here a quick, on the spot technique that an athlete can use to regulate that emotional state and bring their focus back to the task that they need to execute here? What would it be, by your opinion?
Right. So it's an interesting way that the question is framed because
Mm-hmm.
there's I agree with it and I disagree with a part of it. So
Okay.
I'll tell you what I mean.
Yeah.
So the part I agree with is that sometimes in the moment techniques can help.
Yeah.
The part that I'm more skeptical of is thinking about it as a technique that you only do in the moment.
I see.
Because these in the moment techniques, it actually takes a lot of practice beforehand to get them to work in the moment.
To be tuned.
It's like right,
Yeah.
exactly. So and I think you probably know this as well, Ivan. But if you let's say you ask someone to deadlift
Yeah.
a heavy amount of weight, is there any technique that you could teach them that would make them a bit more effective on the spot?
Well, it's quite difficult because it's just a pure lift. So everything is that engages just a pure lifting technique. So maybe on the spot you can just give them special cues if he's doing something differently. But if he is very in tuned, then I think everything rest it should be like on the mindset. If you believe that you're gonna lift that weight, you will lift that. So maybe just what I do the cues, like you said before, there is usually some kind of emotional connection through it while you're doing it. So maybe I will reframe it to that part of our conversation. So I would lead them, just to find a why, and maybe by defining why they're actually at that moment, at that competition, can really help them maybe getting through some difficulties that they're finding on the pitch.
Right. Okay, great. So
Mm-hmm.
I completely agree with you that
Mm-hmm.
in that moment there's some cues,
Mm-hmm.
some mindset cues,
Yeah.
some tapping into the emotion in
Mm-hmm.
that moment that can help them
Yeah.
maybe perform the lift a bit more effectively, maybe even lift a bit heavier.
Yeah.
But could you use in that moment, could you use any cue or any in the moment technique to help someone who usually picks up 100 kilograms
Mm-hmm.
to deadlift 400 kilograms?
No, no. It of course it takes time, of course, to get to the
Right.
training. Yeah, to develop themselves. Yes.
Right.
Yeah, I'm seeing your
Perfect.
point.
Perfect.
So
So,
yes, they definitely have to work before that to like you said, to get in tune that the situation when it occurs.
yes, yes, exactly, because it's exactly the same
Mm-hmm.
mentally. From a mental performance standpoint, there are things that I could give you, techniques that could help you in the moment, like the grounding technique
Mm-hmm.
that I've already given you, the 5 4 3 2 1,
Yeah.
like the breathing technique, the physiologic sigh that we spoke about. But in order for those techniques to be effective, we need the training up to that point.
Yeah.
All those days of training and practice to really build out your psychology so that you can lift up a heavier weight.
Yeah.
But it's not physical weight in this case, it's emotional weight.
Yeah.
So, so any of these techniques that I speak about, people should realize that they're just the cherry on the top. They're a way to cope in the moment, but the underlying psychology has to be elevated if you really want to get good at emotion regulation. So, with that being said, I think since I've already given some in the moment techniques, the long term work that you want to do to get better at regulating your emotions is to really create what's called an emotional separation, where you're not feeling you're not swimming in your emotions, you're able to observe them. And that actually is a medium to long-term process where if you're feeling something, you learn how to name it firstly. So you get very good at being able to say not just that you feel bad, but that you maybe feel a bit anxious or trembly or nervous or frustrated or agitated. All of these words help create a bit more awareness of your emotional state, and what you name you can tame. So if you know what the emotion is, you have a better chance of regulating it. Whereas those who don't have very good differentiated emotional awareness, they just feel bad. They just feel ugh.
Yeah.
And there aren't any specific techniques you can use to deal with the ughness. But if you know that you're moody because you're tired, or Ivan, have you ever had a bad mood because you've been hungry?
Yeah, definitely had. Have had, yeah,
Right.
definitely, yeah. I know the feeling, yeah.
Definitely. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, I had that yesterday, and
Okay.
I was annoyed with my partner because of it.
Yeah.
But because I had that differentiated awareness that this is the kind of frustration that feels like hunger, because I have that differentiated awareness, my treatment is very refined and specific. And my treatment in that case was to eat a burger.
Okay.
Right. So it's the same with emotional regulation. If you get very good at naming your emotions, maybe you can even use an emotional chart. If you Google emotional chart or emotional rainbow or something like that, you'll get a lot of emotional terms. And then if you can start familiarizing yourself with those labels and linking those labels to physiological states, you'll get better at regulating them in specific ways.
I mean, that is great. And you gave so many great lessons to our listeners today. And maybe for the listeners out there who are not on the top of their game, who are not elite athletes, but maybe just perhaps some people who would like to be high achieving professionals one day, or even parents or students. So what is the single most transferable mental strategy uh, from the world of elite sport or just any professionalism that we can use to improve our own day-to-day life in a sense of
Mhm.
performance and well-being?
A very powerful one is mindfulness. I would highly recommend
Okay.
mindfulness. I've seen that being useful for elite athletes in those high stakes, high pressure moments. I've seen it be useful for entrepreneurs. I've seen it be useful for leaders who need to be present with those that they're leading. I've seen it useful for people who want to enjoy a meal and really taste their
Yeah.
food,
Yeah.
or people who want to sleep better because they can feel the bed and the cushions beneath them.
Yeah.
Mindfulness, I think, is a very, very powerful one. But above and beyond that, I would say that the most important thing is more your philosophy than the specific technique. I would encourage people to have a perform well philosophy. And what I mean by perform well is that you focus on performance, but you also focus on wellness.
Yeah.
That's what I mean by perform well. It's
Okay.
both those aspects. You're
Okay.
performing, but you're doing it well from a sense of wellness.
Yeah.
And if you do that, if you focus on how you're feeling, on your emotions, if you stay connected to your state of being and not just what you're doing with your hands and feet, I think you'll be creating a much more sustainable, robust kind of success, and one that feels good along the journey. Because we always hear everyone say life is not about the end destination, it's about the journey.
Yeah.
But how many of us, when we're trying to achieve high levels of
Yeah.
performance, how many of us actually practice that and really enjoy what we're doing? For you and I to enjoy this podcast,
Of
and for
course.
you, whatever you're doing after this, Ivan,
Yeah.
to be able to really immerse yourself and be playful and stay present and just have a good time. That's the main thing I'd like to leave people with.
Yeah, definitely. That's very good. And just maybe a quick question towards that modern challenge that we are facing nowadays, especially the young generation, the Generation Z that we are now having, because most of the people are actually telling, and all of the experts, that the Generation Z is the most, how should I say, fragile generation that we have in our history. Most of them committed suicide out there. Most of them also were very depressed. So they're facing a lot of mental and health challenges out there. So what is maybe a new mental health challenges also here that we are also seeing that it emerges from a modern athletes, maybe that you can correlate with that I just said, perhaps maybe even related to social media, maybe related to that 24/7 screenity that we have, or is it here just pushing for the constant optimization, improving our self-worth to the world out there, because it is very high competitive, and now everything is some kind of closing in because we have a lot of big companies, just pushing that narrative, or that, we have to work harder to achieve something.
Well, I think the golden thread in everything you've mentioned is social comparison versus social connection.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of people are being driven by social comparison
Yeah.
because we see everyone on social media is broadcasting the highlight reel
Yeah.
of their life,
Yeah.
the best snippets. And we're scrolling through that and thinking everyone's so much more attractive and intelligent
Yeah.
and muscular and richer than we are.
Yeah.
What's wrong with us? We're so behind. We're so far behind. And I think this is leading to a lot of anxiety and depression and self-esteem issues. Since you mentioned social media
Yeah.
as well, I think social media has really, really fueled this. And it's leading to a lot of loneliness. That's the irony, is that the more connected we are digitally, the lonelier we're feeling over time.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I think there's a lot of people don't understand how important social connection is to your mental well-being. And if social connection, true, authentic, genuine relationships, if those things are important to your mental well-being, they're also important to your performance and to your long-term success.
Definitely. And Evan, as we wrap up here, maybe what is the one final piece of encouragement here you would give to anyone who feels maybe overwhelmed by the pressure, and is maybe looking to build that greater mental resilience?
I would say that if you were waiting for permission to feel good
Mm-hmm.
before getting to your end destination, you have it. You have the permission. If you were waiting for it, if you were waiting for someone to give you the permission
Yeah.
to actually start feeling good and enjoying life and to be present and playful, you now have it. And now that you have this permission, and now that you know there's a happy path to success and to high performance, it's your responsibility to take it. And I hope that you do spend the time trying to figure out not just how to do well, but also how to feel well. Because at the end of the day, it's all these little moments that make up our lives. You could spend your whole life trying to achieve success and feeling stressed and tense and finally waiting to get to that end point, and you could feel very empty and depressed when you do get there.
Yeah, definitely.
And to avoid that, I would say learn how to be present, learn how to enjoy this moment. Because if you practice not enjoying the moment, if you practice just trying to be satisfied one day, when one day does come, you're still not going to be satisfied. And so that's how I would encourage you to say that just do something you enjoy today, connect to yourself, connect to others, enjoy the fact that you can do the physical activity, that you have a body that's capable of doing that, even if you're not performing as you'd like to yet, even if you're not world champion just as yet. Just enjoy that fact. And through that enjoyment, through that connection, through that presence and focus in the present moment, you will create the results from the process. Because and I'll leave you with this quote: the person who focuses on the person who focuses on the process masters the process that leads to the results, but the person who focuses on the results ends up losing both.
I love it. And that practically leads us to the very end of our conversation. That was very incredibly insightful conversation that I have here. I learned so much about how to delegate and to have that balance between pushing for excellencies and just preserving that mental health. So thank you for sharing your unique perspective from that world of elite sport performance, and how do we navigate through that lens, and now for giving that practical tools that we can all use on a daily basis. So maybe our key takeaway here, of course, today, that performance is maybe inseparable from well-being. And perfectionism can be managed by separating this critique, like you said, from identity, and just using that simple techniques like deliberate visualization and that structural rituals that we can apply on a daily basis. They can also be very powerful and anchoring ourselves, having and engaging that control against that anxiety. So never not to forget, where can our listeners find you, learn more from you, and about your coaching, and of course follow your work here.
Yeah, so it's just important to remember my name.
Mhm.
It's Navern, which is like never with an N
Yeah,
at the end.
yeah,
And my surname is Subramani. It's like super money, but
super
just with
money.
the B.
Yeah, super money. Okay.
Subramani. Yeah, right. So if you search that name on Google, you'll find my website. If you search it on LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, or TikTok, you'll find my page there.
Fantastic, Neven. And we will have the links to all of Neven's resources in the description box below. So, Neven, thank you again for being such a wonderful guest. And thank you for all of your, of course, your listeners who are tuning in to the Let's Get Moving podcast. I also need to tell that you should definitely join us the next time to the next episode. Until then, take control of your mind as much as you take care of your body. And like Nevin said, please take and just conquer everything. So thanks, Nevin.
Thanks, Ivan. Pleasure being here. I enjoyed it.
Yeah,
Thank you.
me too. Me too, man.